This is the 200th anniversary of Hillsborough Baptist Church. There's been a lot of tremendous things happen through the years. So we just want to talk about one of those exciting things. And so, thank you, Gordon. And so we want to talk about one of those exciting things. And that was an expansion at the old church and on Main Street. And not just an expansion, but a renovation at the same time. My name is Hugh Morrisey, and this is my good friend here,
Gordon Hisey.
And I'm just going to ask some questions, as Gordon was on the building committee at the time, and so we will we'll discuss kind of how this all took place. What year did this take place, Gordon?
Well, Hugh, on May 26, 1988, a building permit was issued for the reconstruction and construction of a family life center at the Hillsborough Baptist Church on Main Street in Hillsborough. I'd like to back up a little bit. It didn't actually start then. It started a few years previous to that as committees were formed. In 1986, there was a building committee formed. The building itself was constructed in 1910 after a fire burned the previous building. So we were dealing with facilities that were made for the early 1900s. So. The church began to realize that it lacked a lot of facilities. Things were going to have to change a bit for that. If I recall right, a lot of it was centered on our youth, right from nursery up. We didn't have proper facilities to accommodate that type of ministry. A building committee was formed and looked into. And just as a side note, even prior to that, in the late 70s, I remember we built a youth room in the basement of the church. Actually, it was an old coal room where they used to store the coal. And to get down there, we had to jackhammer through rock, solid rock, for, a good 30 feet or more just to make a tunnel to get down to that area. And this was done under Pastor Mead. So things were progressing as we went along. And that probably was the first push that led us to do the renovations in the 1980s. We started out then.
That was quite an undertaking for a congregation.
Ooh, it was a big undertaking. There was some hesitancy, naturally. The building itself was, like I say, built in, I suppose, 1911. It was beautifully done. The architecture of it was beyond compare, actually, for this area.
Yeah. A lot of visioning when it was built initially, and certainly took a lot of visioning for expansion to go on.
Yeah. Funny, as a note to that, too, I read recently where that building was built for a cost of $20,000.
Imagine. But $20,000 in 1910 was a lot of money.
It sure was. Yeah.
So really the youth was the incentive for...
In my mind, yeah, but there was, we had a building with 2 washrooms that were way downstairs in the dungeon.
Yeah.
So, there's things like that.
The dungeon.
Yeah. I really think that a lot of this stemmed from, or the renovation stemmed from our need to upgrade our facilities, and the youth part of the ministry had a big deal of that.
How long did it take from the time you got the building committee together until the completion of the project?
Well, it only took about a year to build and do the renovations. We started on May 26th, there's the building permit there. I don't know if you can see it on camera or not. And it was issued on May 26th. And we had our opening service, our dedication of the building on April of 1989. So started in 88 and
for the actual building of the project. A lot of planning prior to that, no doubt.
A lot of planning prior to. And I should say, we used the construction people called Chapelstone.
Mm-hmm.
They were in the business of doing a lot of churches, either building from complete new buildings or doing renovations. So that's where we ended up with Chapelstone.
So in this building committee, do you have, like, can you bring to your remembrance, or do you have in your notes who all was on that committee?
Yeah, I do. There's a bulletin here. Actually, this bulletin was for the dedication of the building. And on the building committee, well, it was quite a few. Actually, and I think it was from every department in the church we could think of. I was elected as chairman, and Jack Layton, building supervisor, and Bill Ricker, some people remember him, he was the building fund treasurer. Gerald Carlin was on it, Ray Duffy, Clyde Downey, Shirley Forsythe, Myra Steves, Glendon Steves, that would be Freda Steves' husband, and Robert Archie Steves, that's Bob and Joan Steves, and Reverend Murray McDonald.
You had quite a fleet.
We had quite a fleet, yeah.
And so you were chair of this building committee?
I was chair of the committee. I should start out here. I'm one of these guys that couldn't build a sandbox, let alone. I'm not like a Jim Reed or people that can do carpentry work. But I do think I became one of the best gophers around. Jack Layton, and we'll get to Jack in a minute.
Right.
He would send me for this and that. So,
how did that come about? I remember Jack very well. Had he come in just about the time this was starting, or just
no?
prior,
He was there before. I kind of look on it as the Lord placed the right man in the right place at the right time.
Was he ever the right man? I worked under him on a construction site one time, and very effective.
Oh, very effective. You know, it was fun to go down.
Yeah.
Jack made it that way.
Yes.
He was the project manager, and he lived next door, just down the street.
Yes, he did.
So he didn't have far to go to work. Jack was retired. He'd been in construction work all his life. He certainly had learned a lot over the years. The church hired Jack, actually. Chapelstone at first was kind of reluctant. They didn't know what kind of, naturally, they wouldn't know what kind of guy this might turn out to be as a project manager. In the end, when we were all through, they tried to hire Jack because they saw what a man he could do. You know, there's another little interesting out there too. One of Jack's relatives had worked on the building of the old church on Main Street.
When it was initially built.
When it was initially built.
Interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. In fact, they had a photo to support it. I'm not sure which one was the relative, but...
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Right down through the years.
Yeah.
Were there any neat stories that you could recollect in the process of all of this expansion?
In the actual construction itself, there was many things that took place. I remember Jack starting out, and of course there's a lot of bushes back there, and we had to clear it out a little bit. He had to measure it off so it would fit the way the plans that Chapelstone had described it to fit. And he was so meticulous in marking that off. And for good reason, because on those pads that the posts stood, there was 12 posts. 16 posts, I'm sorry. The posts at the back were probably about 30 feet high, and they had to sit on a cement base. They had to line up with each other, and they had to meet the church, the old church, at the right point. Jack took a lot of time doing that.
What was the diameter roughly, though? They were quite large.
They had to be, almost 2 feet across.
Yeah.
And they were all filled with rebar first, and before the cement went in.
Yeah.
I remember, like I said, when working with Jack, that he was a great teaser, and there was a lot of laughter. But the days they filled those sonotubes with cement, he said, "Boys, I want you to be quiet and listen. We put that cement in there not just rightly, those sonotubes will explode, come apart." That's one of the 2 times I saw Jack with a serious face in the whole project. And then the other time was when the steel came in, had to be laid on top of those posts. Of course, Jack's careful measuring would all come out here or it wouldn't come out.
Yeah.
And it fit to a T.
He had his foundation right.
He had his foundation right, yeah.
You must have had to have a crane there for lifting the steel into place.
Oh, the steel in place, yes. The steel was put in place. I don't think on today's work sites that we would have got away with some of the lack of safety features that we had. I remember putting the rebar up there and then putting these big sonotubes down over it.
Yes.
And man, you were waving those way up in the air. And this is where the volunteer work come in. It was all volunteer guys that were helping us that.
Wow.
It was something.
Wow.
Yeah.
What was a personal highlight for you?
Well, the personal highlight for me was the volunteer workers. Boys, the whole church pulled together. There was, it was funny. There was one instance when we had the steel up and it come time to lay the floor down in the Family Life Center. I think about every youth in Hillsborough and older ones were there with their hammers nailing that plywood down. It was a sight to behold, and you could hear them all over here, but bang, bang, bang. It was great.
Of course, a project like that for the congregation that size. Do you remember what the congregation was at that time and what the project cost?
The congregation at that time was probably around 150, somewhere in there, on a regular basis of people that were supporting the work financially and every other way. That was your base probably to work with. The cost of the project, when Chapelstone estimated the cost, was $328,209. And on January 16th, 1989, $287,000, 906. I noticed in one of the annual reports we had borrowed from the foundation $240,000. Yeah. And it came in under cost.
Wow.
Yeah, under projected cost.
Wow.
Yeah, and that was because of the volunteer work.
Yeah.
Look, we had ladies in there what come time to paint the Sunday school rooms. I remember Bertram Steves, Ruth Hawks, Freda Steves, Margie Downey. They were all there, and man, did they ever do a good job. They got quite a bit on themselves by times, but they did a fantastic job.
Not just an expansion, but it was a renovation in the existing building at the same time.
Yeah, it was,
a
a huge renovation in the existing building.
Yeah, it was sort of a single floor when you began, and then you made an upstairs to it.
We made an upstairs over the old vestry. To the Sunday school rooms upstairs were connected to each other. And so to get from one classroom to another, you had to go through classrooms.
And I remember as a boy being there, and there were different classrooms going on within the main floor.
Right.
Fred Steves would be teaching up here,
Yes.
Gwyneth Steves would be teaching back here.
Yeah.
And I don't know, but there might have been a third one over to the side, so you certainly needed classrooms.
Yes, a needed classroom. I mean, the sound was traveling all over the place, yeah. And we had no kitchen facilities to speak of.
Yeah.
And I have mentioned the washrooms were
Just
terrible.
just lots of need.
Yeah.
And quite a little project for a congregation that size to take on.
It was, yeah. And at the same time, we were repairing other parts of the building, like those big windows there, always needing attention. And
there was a Miracle Sunday or a mortgage burning Sunday that took place.
this bulletin here says Miracle Sunday Mortgage Burning. This was in April 10th, 1994. The mortgage was burned, and like I say, about 6-7 years after the building was started. So it didn't take a whole lot of time for the church to pay down the mortgage.
Did the church experience some church growth as a result of?
Yes, it did. There was church growth, and Pastor Dean came about 1990, and Vernon Vickrock shortly after. There was growth then, and then with Pastor Norman Woodworth and Marlene came in, and Pastor Norman did a lot on men's work and Sunday school work on the side, and of course Marlene in the music.
Yeah.
The morning attendances got up over 200.
Yeah.
Like in the 220 range wasn't uncommon. We used to open up those movable doors so they could sit in the vestry there too.
Well, there was an actual gymnasium as part of this project, or the main part of it, really, I guess.
It was, yeah.
The project begun under Murray McDonald's ministry.
It did, yeah. Murray left about 1989 in that vicinity. Well, just about that time, yeah, because Dean came about a year later.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we liked their McDonald's, I guess.
That's right. That's right. That's right. We're seeing all of this growth in a 200-year period. Now, I don't know if you can remember this just off the top of your head, but how many actual church buildings sat on that site?
Actually, the church did start out in 1822, or at least it was incorporated in 1820. October 6th, I believe it was. They met in the barn then. As far as I could tell, there's been at least 4 buildings on that site. Kind of shaky on the first 2. I think one was small and it was moved up the road. And I was told another one was moved across the road, became one of the grocery stores across the road.
Yeah.
And then the one that burned in 1910, that was a beautiful building. The one they built that's still down there now is that one like I said, they...
Nicely built, nice architecture.
Oh, the architect's beautiful in it, yeah. The Lord blessed all through that. And like you say, the amazing how the people pulled together in actual building of it and the support of it financially afterward to pay that mortgage off.
Excellent,
Yeah,
excellent.
yeah.
That's a great overview for that time period.
Yeah.
And I'm sure it'll be a real blessing.
Yeah.